All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Provectus's 2026 Annual Stockholder Meeting. My name is Susan Zhu from Alliance Advisors, and I'll help facilitate today's meeting. We'll just give everyone a moment to join before we get started, but a few quick housekeeping rules. If you can hear us clearly, you're all set on audio, and if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please try dialing in by phone using the details in your webinar confirmation email. During the formal presentation of the meeting, we ask that you please keep your microphones muted. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll be addressing those after the formal business concludes. Please also note that today's meeting is being recorded. Before we begin, I'd like to note that the statements made during today's meeting may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the federal securities laws. These statements are based on management's current expectations and involve risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially. Participants are encouraged to review the risk factors and forward-looking statement disclaimers contained in the company's filings within SEC. All right. I think we're ready to get started. Dominic Webster, are you able to hear me? Yeah, we're good? Okay. All right. I will now turn things over to Ed Pershing, Chairman of the Board and Chief Executive Officer of Provectus Pharmaceuticals, to call the meeting to order. Ed, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Provectus Biopharmaceuticals, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to those here in Knoxville, as well as those participating online today. Thank you for attending Provectus's 2026 Annual Meeting of Stockholders. I'm Ed Pershing, Chairman of Provectus Board of Directors and its Chief Executive Officer. We'd like to call the meeting to order and to entertain a motion from a Provectus shareholder to elect the chairman of this annual meeting.
My name is Dominic Rodriguez, and I am president of Provectus, a member of the board, and a company stockholder. I move that Ed Pershing be elected to serve as meeting chairman.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey. I'm also a member of the board and Provectus shareholder. I second the motion.
All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. I hereby accept the appointment as meeting chairman. I also appoint Nathan Kibler of the law firm Baker, Donaldson, Bierman, Caldwell, and Berkowitz, P.C., and Provectus outside legal counsel as meeting secretary. Before going any further into our annual meeting, I'd like to introduce the company directors and officers. On my far right is Dominic Rodriguez, president, also Vice Chairman of the Board of Provectus, Webster Bailey, Board Member of Provectus, Jack Lacey, Board Member of Provectus. In addition, we have Heather Raines in attendance, CFO of Provectus, back here, and Devin Stevens, Controller of Provectus, is around here somewhere. So I think everyone knows all of us. So pleased to have you here today. We will now take care of preliminary matters before proceeding with the stockholder vote. Directors has appointed Dominic to act as Inspector of Election. The board set April 20th, 2026 as the date of record for this annual meeting of stockholders. As of this record date, there are 420,279,879 shares of our common stock outstanding, 956,985 shares of our Series D convertible preferred stock outstanding, and 14,389,027 shares of our Series D1 convertible preferred stock outstanding. Each share of common stock entitles its holder to cast one vote, each share of Series D preferred stock to cast one vote, and each share of Series D1 preferred stock to cast 10 votes on any matter to be voted on at this meeting. Under Delaware law, the presence at the annual meeting in person or by proxy of holders of a majority of the shares of Provectus's common stock outstanding on the record date will constitute. Immediately prior to commencement of this meeting, the Inspector of Elections has determined that the holders of approximately 59.3% of the outstanding shares of common stock were represented by proxy at the annual meeting. Therefore, a quorum is present. The meeting is fully constituted and its business may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I move to waive the reading of the notice of the meeting, the affidavit of mailing of the notice, proxy material, and the minutes of last year's annual meeting.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey. I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I second the motion.
You've heard the motion to waive readings of the notice of the meeting, the affidavit of mailing of the notice, the proxy material, and the minutes of the last year's annual meeting. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion is carried. The meeting secretary will please insert the notice of the meeting, the affidavit mailing of the notice, and the proxy material in the minute book of the company. At this time, we want to collect all stockholders' proxies that have not yet been returned. Please raise your hand if you have a proxy. The Inspector of Elections designee, Heather Raines, Chief Financial Officer of Provectus, and a Provectus stockholder will come around and pick it up. Any stockholders present today who have signed and submitted proxies for this meeting do not need to vote today. Your shares will be voted in accordance with your instructions on your proxy card. Now, please raise your hand if you did not receive a proxy, or if you received a proxy and returned it but now want to change your vote, or if you received a proxy but did not fill it out and now intend to vote at the meeting. If you fill any of these descriptions, please let the Inspector of Elections know you would like a ballot by raising your hand. Please mark the ballot as the stockholder votes are taken. If you choose to vote in person, it will be necessary for you to prove your ownership of the company's common stock as of the record date of April 20, 2026. Did all those who raised their hand receive one? Stockholders may submit their ballots until final call for ballots is made. I will report the outcome of the vote of each proposal after all the votes have been tallied at the end of the meeting. We have 5 items on the agenda this afternoon. 1, to elect 4 directors to serve on our board for a 1-year term. 2, to conduct an advisory vote to approve the compensation of our named executive officers. 3, to ratify the selection of CPAs PC, the independent registered public accounting firm for 2026. 4, to authorize our board to amend our certificate of incorporation as amended by the certificate of designation to effect a reverse stock split of common stock. Series D1 convertible preferred stock in a ratio between 1 for 10 and 1 for 50, where the ratio would be determined by the board at its discretion by corresponding amendment to the certificate of designation to provide a certain term of stock split. And number 5, authorize our board, if and only if proposal 4 is approved, to amend our certificate of incorporation as amended by the certificate of designation to decrease the number of authorized shares of our common stock and preferred stock by the stock split ratio determined by our board. We will now conduct the stockholder votes on these matters during the formal portion of the meeting. After the stockholder voting is completed, we will adjourn the meeting and provide a company update followed by a question and answer general session as we have in the past. We will now proceed with the formal portion of the annual meeting. The first item of business today is the election of members of the board who will serve until 2027 annual meeting. The board has nominated Webster Bailey, Dr. Jack Lacey, Dominic Rodriguez, and Ann Pershing to serve as the directors of the company. The floor is now open for discussion regarding this proposal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic I am a stockholder, and I move to end discussion and proceed with the vote for the first item.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, Webster, as a stockholder, and I second the motion.
You've heard the motion to end the discussion on the first item of business. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion is carried. Stockholders are entitled to one vote for each common share registered, 1 vote for each Series D preferred share registered, and 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions with respect to the voting on the first item of business? The second item of business today is a proposal to conduct an advisory vote to approve the compensation of our named executive officers. The floor is open for discussion regarding this proposal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. I'm a stockholder. I move to end discussion and proceed with the vote for the second item of business.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey, and I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I second the motion.
You've heard the motion to end the discussion of the second item of business. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The motion is carried. Stockholders are entitled to vote to 1 vote for each common share registered, 1 vote for each Series D preferred share registered, and 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions with respect to voting on the second item of business? Item number 3. The third item of business today is the proposal to ratify the selection of CBIZ CPAs PC as our independent registered public accounting firm for 2026. The floor is now open for discussion regarding this proposal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. I am a Provectus stockholder, and I move to end discussion and proceed with the vote for the third item of business.
For the motion, is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey. I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I second the motion.
You've heard the motion to end the discussion on the fourth item of business. All those in favor say aye. Stockholders are entitled to 1 vote for each I think I just lost sound. All right. 1 vote for each Series D preferred share registered, and 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions with respect to voting on the third item of business? Yes, these are just the same as last year.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. I am a Provectus stockholder, and I move to end discussion and proceed with the vote for the item of business.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey. I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I second the motion.
All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The motion is carried. Stockholders are entitled to 1 vote for each common share registered, 1 vote for each Series D preferred share registered, and 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions regarding respect to voting on the third item of business? The fourth item of business today is the proposal to authorize the Board of Directors to amend our certificate of incorporation as amended by the certificate of designation of the Series D and D1 convertible preferred shares to effect a reverse stock split of stock in our Series D and D1 convertible preferred stocks at a ratio between 1:10 and 1:50. The ratio would be determined by our board at its discretion and to make corresponding amendments to the certificates of designation to provide for the proportional adjustments of the terms upon reverse stock. is now open for discussion of this proposal.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez. I am a Provectus stockholder, and I move to end discussion and proceed with the vote.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey, stockholder. Second the motion.
You've heard the motion. The end discussion on the fourth item of business. All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The motion is carried. Stockholders are entitled to vote one vote for each common share registered, one vote for each Series D preferred share registered, 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions? The fifth and final item of business today is the proposal to authorize our board, known as proposal number 4. Our stock split proposal is approved to amend our certificate of corporation as amended by the certificate of designation to decrease the number of authorized shares of common stock and preferred stock. The same reverse stock split ratio. The floor is now open for discussion. You've heard the motion. You've heard the motion. In the Series D preferred share registered and 10 votes for each Series D1 preferred share registered. If you are now voting by ballot, please mark your ballot and hold on to it for now. Are there any questions with respect to the voting on the fifth item of business? I would ask the designee of the inspector of voting to collect the ballots of those in attendance. Is there any other business to come before this annual meeting? I will now ask the Inspector of Elections to summarize his report on the stockholder votes. The chairman recognizes Dominic Rodriguez.
With respect to the first proposal of the election of 4 directors to serve on Provectus' board for a term expiring at the 2027 Annual Meeting of Stockholders, the results of stockholder voting are that all 4 received a plurality of the votes cast. With respect to the remaining 4 proposals, the results of stockholder voting are that all proposals were approved by the required votes.
Thank you, Dominic. The Inspector of Elections will furnish the meeting secretary with a written report of the final vote count with respect to the matters voted on today, which will be included in the annual meeting minutes. We have concluded the activities and business of the formal portion of today's annual meeting. Excuse me. Before adjourning and moving on to company update portion, I want to express to our stockholders my sincere appreciation. Sorry, I came close to getting through this. I don't follow rules too closely. Moving on to the company update, I want to express to all of our stockholders my sincere appreciation and the sincere appreciation of all the directors, officers, and employees of Provectus Biopharmaceuticals for your active participation in the stockholder voting process and for your support of our business direction and management. Your continued interest in Provectus is very much welcome and deeply appreciated. If there is no further business to come before this meeting, I ask for a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dominic Rodriguez, stockholder, and I move to adjourn the annual meeting.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Webster Bailey. I'm a Provectus stockholder, and I second the.
You have heard the motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion is carried. The 2026 annual meeting of Provectus Biopharmaceuticals is adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will now begin the company update portion of the meeting in just a few minutes. Yeah, we're ready to go. But I digress. Again, welcome. As always, this is the part of this meeting we enjoy the most. So we always feel like we've got to be prepared because we never know what direction the questions are going to come from. But I want to open it up and again express our appreciation for your support throughout this past year. And just to go back and look, one of the things that I've mentioned in past years, most recently in the 2024 Annual Shareholder Meeting, which when you're trying to fix a broken or basically company on the absolute edge of collapse, one of the first things you should do when you're evaluating whether you're going to tackle it or not is set certain milestones to see whether you can actually accomplish it. And do that on the front end because it is a way, I should have known that happened, that is a way to judge your own performance and the performance of those around you, is whether you're staying on track. And so if you'll recall, in 2024, I commented about a milestone that I had not mentioned to anyone before starting this journey. And that was to turn the opinion of one of the leading melanoma experts in the world, the most published physician in melanoma care and research in the world, to change her opinion 180 degrees about PV10. Because she had in prior leadership, she had once dismissed it as basically saying, yeah, I could probably shoot vodka into a tumor and destroy the tumor, but I haven't killed the disease. And because of some things I was exposed to in the 1990s, I was familiar with that kind of comment about intratumoral therapies. And that was one of the ways, it was a hot topic in the 90s and early 2000s to try to find the right agent and use intratumoral therapy. And my attitude's always been, from an experience I had talking to an oncologist, it sounded to me like the criticism was just not about intratumoral therapy. You just didn't have the right drug agent. If you had the right drug agent that, as it killed the tumor, would elicit a systemic immune response, well, B can kill the disease. And so in hearing that, I'll never forget where I was standing when I heard that criticism had been made. I just thought, the industry still doesn't get it. If you can find a systemic agent, intratumoral therapy can be successful. So that was one of those milestones that had been unvoiced. Others I was very open about within the team. Dominic knows this, that we wear each other out in our discussions over the years. One of the goals was to get engaged with St. Jude in Memphis, one of the world's leading pediatric oncology centers. And all my colleagues know I've been banging on every door possible for at least 5 years, close to 6 years now. And all those efforts didn't go anywhere, but a phone call from St. Jude's to us, or an email from St. Jude's to us, has created a relationship with St. Jude. And I give credit for the work that Dr. Arun Narendran at Alberta Children's Hospital and the University of Calgary Cummins School of Medicine, his work relative to sting signaling. His work in that field caused the MD researcher at St. Jude's to reach out to Provectus. And we're now working with St. Jude's in that field of research. And that, to me, was a big step along the way. And you'll see a pattern by the end of my comments as far as for these kind of events. Another milestone I had to measure, I hope this was more of a dream, was to basically get Provectus engaged with NIH, the National Institute of Health. Because I grew up, and my slang term for the NIH was, that's the Mac Daddy of all of them. I mean, it is the center for research in medicine. And so in August, a group at NCI was associated with NIH reached out to us, and because of the government shutdowns and so forth and cutbacks, the government cutbacks. It was January before they reached back out. They asked to wait, and once they got through that, they reached up to us. And now I'm pleased to say that they are now working in an animal model related to HCC, liver cancer. And here's the description that NIH uses of stock, because we're working with the NIH Clinical Center, and it is the nation's largest hospital devoted entirely to clinical research. So it really is the Mac Daddy of medical research. And so we're very pleased to achieve that milestone since our last annual shareholder meeting. Number 3, those of you here today, you're sitting in one of the key milestones. From the time first interacted with Provectus in their office space, going back to the founders, I always felt like it was not adequately secure. If you're really going to change the world in medicine, you better have secure space. And you better be extremely conscientious about security in all aspects. And so because of funding and so forth, we've had to be on a very tight budget. But I'm thrilled to have been able to reacquire the former headquarters of PYA that Doug Yoakley, wherever you're sitting, and I tackled in 1991 when it was basically been sitting abandoned for 10 years and restored it. Outgrew it in 2009 and across the street, and then to get a chance to buy it back in concert with the East Tennessee Foundation is a dream come true. And so having a facility like this that can accommodate a meeting such as today, and not having to use the Hilton, and also having much, much better security than the company's ever had, is a key element if you're going to play in the real world of major medicine. Pardon? Yeah, free parking, exactly. That's the truth. Yeah, and not all the hassles of going downtown or anywhere else they've been. Item number 4 was, for me personally, and I think for Dominic, I won't speak for him, as far as the milestone, was something that was really the most challenging aspect of taking on this effort to fix this company, turn it around and get its medical drug agent out to the world. And that was truly having a much better understanding of the mechanism of action, and most importantly, basically establishing what the real mechanism of action was. Because there were some aspects of the description of the mechanism of action, even as an accountant, I knew were just absolutely wrong. And so it was fundamentally important to find out how this molecule works. And to me, this is the most important of all the milestones I've established for me personally and then in my preparation for leading the company. Because without such knowledge, it would be impossible to capture the full value of our drug agents, both financially and medically health and for medical health improvements for people around the world. And one of the things we didn't have in starting this journey, we didn't have AI tools. And so one of the things I give Dominic the credit, I dream up questions and ideas, and the genius over here on my right uses multiple AI tools to evaluate, and we explore different ways this drug is working. And without AI, it would have been impossible to be positioned where we are today. I distinctly remember the defining moment was in April of last year, while I was out walking late at night trying to clear my head, and we got into deep discussion about mechanism of action and using AI tools. And it's remarkable and a huge benefit for all of us in this company to watch how those tools have improved over that short period of time and just how much we've learned. We're still challenging it. But Dominic keeps asking me this question, are we there yet? Because I'm trying to understand 100% of what it does, and I know we'll never get there, but we're getting close, and I'll say we're very, very close. And so for all the shareholders that wonder why it takes so long, the fastest way to lose something in this world of medical drug development is not know the mechanism of action. And I'll give you one example. This is something we thought. A fundamental aspect of this drug is lysosomal destruction. and yet the industry is not going to accept that as a target. It's like, so what else? What's your real target? And so, because of these efforts, we know so much more about what this molecule is capable of doing. And I told Dominic once after he shipped me some materials, had to reread again, trying to grasp all we're advancing. I said, you could put 30 of the leading medical researchers in a room, lock them in there for a month, and they couldn't come up with some of the connections of the variables of how this thing works. And so that's just an important example. Sometimes you've got to have the tools to advance something as complex as this. And so that should encourage all the investors in this company to know the kind of progress we're making in that space. And Dominic will comment more about this later. I also want to share with you milestones to be achieved in the last half of 2026 and then to across 2027 as far as goals we have. We can't guarantee any of this, legal counsel. So I'm just telling you, here's the goals and some things we're targeting. Addition of new board members. We realize we need to fill out our board leadership. Rollout of a robust communications and public relations action plan. Key elements of this plan, and Dominic will comment specifically about this one later, is open science. In the past, we've used the term open source researching, basically using the terminology coming out of the software and IT world. Open source software, so we more rapidly advance. And we're formally announcing and establishing that program. It's been in effect. We just didn't talk about it that much openly, but it is really paying off. What we've quietly done is really paying off. Another goal that I'm confident will occur in 2027, unless unforeseen events occur, is a corporate name change. A key element of that is when we uplist, we do not want to be burdened with the historical name of this company. I've known that from day one, and an investment banker I talked to multiple times a week keeps telling me, you got to change the name. He just said that today on an unsolicited phone call. You got to change the name. Initiating new clinical trials. We understand the importance of developing more data as far as patient outcomes. And last, and what everybody's always most interested in, and definitely not least, in a focused effort to increase Provectus' market value as measured by its common share price, better reflecting the underlying value and potential of our medical drug applications. We are very conscious of our market cap. I will tell you, I know shareholders never like to hear this, but I've said it multiple years, and I think history will prove it true whenever we really get this company where it can go, is that's been a very valuable defense mechanism. Stay under the radar, and Big Pharma just ignores you. They figure you'll run out of money or find out your drug doesn't work, and they're not going to pay attention. And so there's a number of key resources you have to have in place when you start going into that space, and that's been a key area of focus, and some of the things I've just commented on are key elements of that. One simple one being the name change. And in closing, I'll share an event that just happened this week. I actually got the phone call on Monday. It's just a simple anecdotal event that really kind of reflects progress has been that I've just spoken about. And that is, you've heard me say every year, the most common phrase I hear repeatedly is, it sounds too good to be true. It sounds like snake oil. Well, I can tell you there was a stockholder that reached out to Dominic and me about 3 weeks ago. I had a distant family member that's battling cancer, a very aggressive form of cancer, is not responding. They're being treated at a major university-based medical center in this country, and the prognosis is not good at all. And because of his knowledge of the drug, he had shared with him about PV10 cinema materials. And so when the family spoke to their oncologist, what was his first reaction? A quote, Sounds like snake oil. That was his quote. But to his credit, he said, I'll read about it. He was open-minded enough to read about it. So when they went for a very quick follow-up appointment, he had read about it, said, is there some way that you could connect me with that company? And they had texted me while they were in his office and set up a time for him to call me on Monday. And he was fascinated. He was trying to figure out if we had any compassionate use programs. But he was quite verbal in that he would love for that patient to be able to access our drug because they have nothing that works. And they ended up at that appointment admitting the individual because he was septic. But he's got a bacterial infection they can't defeat. And so I was also describing to him our work as an antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal agent. And it was one more, he was unaware of that. He had been focused on the cancer side. But anyway, and the reason why that I think is so important, those that take the time to read about it, we've now published enough information. We've connected the dots, used Dominic's old phrase for people. And if they're just curious enough, it ain't snake oil. And it's not too good to be true. And so I just share that as a closing thought, as evidence of how the world's viewing us differently today than they did June of last year and all the prior years. So thanks for your time and interest.
So we'll do what we usually do, which is go through a company update presentation with you. Again, this company is entirely about this incredible synthetic small molecule called rose bengal sodium. And the one thing we've added to this slide as we highlight the molecular is the notion as we progress through different diseases is that it is, we feel, now looking at 3 clinical stage programs in oncology, in dermatology, in ophthalmology, and then probably a half dozen preclinical programs, is the idea that this molecule is evolving into what we think is a universal catalyst for the cascade or sequence as it relates to its mechanism of action. So Ed talked about our use of AI. We had or discussed at the last shareholder meeting the fact that we did a review as we started to begin using AI tools. We ran an assessment of the 500 or so cancer papers that were available on PubMed related to rose bengal in cancer, looking for inconsistencies, errors, conflicting statements by the various authors to make sure that from a mechanism perspective that we had it down. To our surprise, that aggregation of information turned out many more insights into mechanism and no contradiction. And so that obviously continues to build the confidence, which is already at a very great level. But as Ed said, we needed to understand in more detail what was going on with the so rose bengal, AI to evaluate, assess, review rose bengal and how we will use it in the near future. What's important for us to communicate is that we're not, and I think the cliche phrase is token maxing. This is not about compute. This is about simply using a $20 a month subscription times however many AI agents we use, sometimes having to simply wait till 5 p.m. when demand is a little bit lower on their systems and servers. Because what we're trying to do is, and you may have heard this, that it isn't necessarily the agents themselves, the so-called large language models. It's your data or your company's data that is what they need to be trained on. And so you can, as a shareholder on the outside looking in, you can use type in Rose Bengal sodium, Rose Bengal, and learn more and more. Wonderful. But those queries are not the same as ours because we're training the agents we paid for and use on the data sets, preclinical data, clinical data, specific papers, and questions that we are trying to ask. And again, your agent is developing a knowledge base from what you're giving in, plus the directions that you want to take it. And so again, it's not compute heavy, it's insight heavy. And so part of what we're trying to do is to understand how do we stand in front of a physician, an medical center, a farm, whomever, whether industry or layperson, how do we describe from start to finish, such as in cancer, we accumulate in the lysosome, the stomach of a cancer cell. Eventually that lysosome ruptures, causing the cell to be blown up, all the way to a well-documented systemic immune response at the T cell, NK cell, NKT cell level. How do we explain that from step to step to step to step? 5 steps. And we have, and we think, now again, you can always continue to refine it, but we feel very confident in being able to articulate that and not use a whole bunch of words. And so that's what we can expect to roll out, we hope, in the next few months. We have 3 clinical stage assets. What does that mean? Categories of disease that we've treated patients, both in terms of the data that we stand upon from the history of the company. The first and the lead asset is the intratumoral injection of Rose Bengal in a saline solution. We all know that. Our shareholders know that as PV10. From the perspective of the diseases or the indications we're looking at, penile cancer, where primarily you're looking for a cytotoxic effect, you're trying to reduce or diminish or eliminate the cancer, and you're hoping for immune activation on the back end, but primarily you're trying to maximize tissue preservation because the standard of care is penectomy. That is a great situation, a perfect setting for where this drug should be applied, as if it were a version of a scalpel for the surgical oncologist. Even though in some cases like this, you have a multidisciplinary team where there's a medical oncologist on the team as well. There are certain other adult solid tumors that we're looking at that leverage the strengths, the specific strengths of PV10 intratumorally, or IL-PV10. One of them is, again, another tissue preservation part of the body where that's really critical. So that's what we want to deploy it for. All of the other strengths that the company has been able to show in historical clinical trials in melanoma and in cancers of the liver, all are relevant, but that tissue preservation piece is so critical. And one of the other adult solid tumors that we would look at for, or are looking at with an academic medical center for IL-PV10 is in a part of the body where the standards of care, or the standard of care sort of is, if I recall properly, is chemotherapy, is radiation, followed by surgery. And so again, there is an opportunity where you can clearly define and delineate why or what PV10's clinical rationale for that is. And it just isn't killing a tumor, and it just isn't the immune response. There's so much more. And that's how we want to evaluate what we're working for in terms of picking the indications. So Ed mentioned, and we're really excited, very excited by this, are 2 collaborations that essentially both were a result of the data that the company has pushed out, particularly over the last many years, but the data that's been made available to researchers and clinicians around the world. Simply building through all of the presentations through different researchers in melanoma, in HCC, because that information is valuable. The collaboration with NIH's Center for Interventional Oncology, which sits at the NIH Clinical Center, which, as Ed said, is America's largest research hospital. Now, they had been working with the reagent grade, the version of Rose Bengal that most researchers typically use. The researchers who knock on our door obviously use our stuff. But that's the standard. And what they had read and papers that have been put out about PV10, and we're working on it to see how it works, and in fact had even been accepted for a medical conference using their material. And in a joking manner for us, what was funny was that the molecule name that they used or defined was PV10, which we all know was rose Bengal. And so that's powerful. And so they were doing work on their own accord with all agent grade material. We had a series of conversations that were meant for us to inform and to educate them that were interrupted by 2 government shutdowns, which they apologized profusely for the time taken. They did what we'll call a pre-pilot study where we shipped vials of PV10 to Bethesda, Maryland during a snowstorm. They picked it up and literally it arrived at the loading dock, and later that day they applied it to their animal model, which is a very specific model for HCC that they prefer, and off they went. And we had a series of update phone calls together with a voluminous amount of emails going back and forth to update us and us to give them feedback on what they were seeing, again, on their dime. And we're very grateful for that. And then now we are on the cusp of starting a pilot study with more of these animals where we will pick up, in our view, relative to the value they bring, and on an absolute basis, a small amount of money, hopefully leading to a much larger program that we hope ends up as a phase 2 clinical trial in HCC, because we've already done a phase 1 with HCC and a series of other cancers metastatic to the liver, and that work would be done under a CRADA, a government contractual construct. But that's an example of a collaboration where they're bringing tremendous value to the table and are really using their efforts to get up to speed and limiting given our limited resources at the moment, allowing us to push forward in this. And really, what is the goal of that? Because we have a very good sense of how patients do. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We know what happens to patients when they have an injection of their HCC or primary liver cancer tumor or one of half a dozen different tumor types. When cancer metastasizes to the liver, the prognosis relative to the primary cancer is horrible. And yet we were able to show through repeat treatments, which was one of the advancements we made over the last bunch of years running that study, and particularly the use of PET-CT, that if you could generate a complete metabolic response that appeared to be prognostic of survival. And so what they're trying to do, NIH, CIO, is trying to robustly describe the mechanistic behavior of PV10 in HCC. So from soup to nuts, yes, it kills tumors, great, but what's going on? And so with that deck of information, with their logo on it, we can knock on other collaborators' doors. We may want to combine that with some other drug agent because it makes sense. And by the way, they're not just researchers. They are researchers at a hospital. So the team that we're working with is a combination of scientists and researchers, PhDs, as well as MDs. The head of the group flattered us, honored us by taking a update phone call where his team members were on their Zooms, and he happened to be in scrubs in the OR because he felt attending the meeting was really, really important, and we were simply blown away by that attendance and that honor to us. Rare pediatric cancer. Again, where can we apply IL-PV10 that others may fear to tread? We do not fear how and where we can use PV10. We need to follow down the middle of the fairway, get our regulatory ducks in order. with respect to the IND, expanding the IND, but we're not worried about which cancer we want to tackle. We would love to tackle them all, but we can't, and we have to remain focused. But it was, again, having collaborators like Dr. Narendran at the University of Calgary and his team push out work as it relates to a notable signaling pathway called STING. There are other pathways that other scientists consider notable, but there's a large audience of folks who think STING is really important as an important immune pathway in the body. He pushes out a paper, an MD PhD, primarily a researcher. He doesn't do clinical work, was made aware of it. He read it, and he asked for vials of PV10 to run in his model because he was kind enough to share a manuscript where he was publishing work using a drug agent that would activate STING to see in this particular rare pediatric cancer if you elevated or better activated this immune pathway, it would have a better impact on the rare pediatric tumor that he was trying to figure out how to solve, a so-called cold tumor. And so, again, fabulous, and we're really excited to work with him. The reason we put it under the intratumoral or the ILPV10 category is because the model system he used was a mouse STING agonist, meaning that the STING agonist would came sort of from came from the mouse as opposed to a human version of it. And the way in which it's deployed or tested is intratumoral. He said to us, look, children, young adults, adolescents who present with this disease don't typically present with tumors that are injectable. Some do, but it would be great if you could deliver this orally or intravenously. So we're happy to raise our hands and, hey, well, Dr. Narendran has done oral work. We've done oral work for bladder cancer. So we're busting at the seams because we would absolutely want to deliver that orally and make it available to all children who have that particular rare pediatric cancer. So that's another example of that. An update on our VisiRose subsidiary, which was a startup company that we created in conjunction with the University of Miami because the folks at Bascom-Palmer Eye Institute were looking for a solution to when topical antibiotics, the first line of treatment, whether you have a bacterial-led eye infection, a fungal, or a parasitic, fails, then you're effectively SOL as it relates to being able to see. And so they apparently went into the textbooks, which we knew there was antimicrobial data dating back into the 80s, 90s, and they proceeded to use the reagent-grade rose Bengal and other forms of it to robustly and rigorously go through in vitro work, petri dish, moving to in vivo. Their choice of animal would be rabbits for that, and dropping it into rabbit's eye, safety and for efficacy. And then eventually going, hey, we have patients, and Bascom-Palmer in Miami has basically an ophthalmology and eye emergency room that for the region, folks can, basically you drive, fly, however you get there, to be admitted, and they were kind enough to give us a tour of that, and it's really cool. So for that, we need to get through that step to then file an IND with FDA that allows you to then test your material in humans. They, of course, have a lot more flexibility to be able to do that because they're simply treating people who are in dire medical need. But we need to have our regulatory house in order. The goal of what we're proposing or will propose is a phase 2b/3 clinical trial, some initial number of patients with the pharmaceutical grade rose Bengal in a saline solution, PV305, with green light, want to presumably check off a few boxes on efficacy, but more on the safety perspective because we're using a different type of rose bengal that we've obviously documented its safety profile, but topically in the eye, we've got to run those hoops and then presumably move to a phase 3 study against the appropriate comparator, which will be natmycin, an antibiotic for the eye that was approved, I think, in 1978 and generally considered suboptimal by clinicians. However, that's the only thing that's been approved. Just as an example, as you may know about how this industry works, the second and for fungal eye infections are 2 antifungal drugs that are given orally that are compounded into topical applications. So therefore, they have not been approved for use in the eye, but they have been approved for dealing with systemic fungal infections. And so again, yes, it's a very weird situation, but we've got to follow the path. And so we're going straight up against natmycin, although again, the typical approach is your agent plus standard of care versus a standard of care. Now, why are we excited by that? Because those same sort of cadre of folks, not necessarily Bascom Palmer, but other key opinion leaders and leaders in the ophthalmic space focused on eye infections, deemed Bascom Palmer's work to be quite powerful, particularly the clinical outcomes that they published. And so in doing so, they found funding from NIH to run the study that we ultimately hope to run. Their shortcoming was they deemed it, for whatever reason, because the data were certainly available, we'll give one cycle of treatment. We'll treat the eye one time with their topical rose bengal plus their green light. And obviously we think that makes no sense, that we believe you give enough rose bengal or enough PV10 and eventually good to great things have the potential to happen. And so, but their data were very useful because for the strain of fungal keratitis fusarium that we plan to use in our study, it beat the standard of care, but the level of beat was not statistically significant. Two cycles of treatment, we're pretty comfortable in believing that we would win that study. Again, that wasn't work that was funded by us, nor was any of the Bascom Palmer work funded by us, although in the course of the relationship they did want vials of PV10 as compounded into PV305, which we provided them because they wanted to see and work with and play with the real thing. We expect this summer another study funded by NIH, I believe, to look at bacterial infections using and being treated by rose bengal and green light. Unfortunately, it's one cycle, but again, they're continuing to do work on our behalf, and I say that fully tongue-in-cheek. We're anxious to see the data because it will help us model what our study would be to eventually run a trial to expand the label to include bacterial keratitis. And then the story kind of gets better from the perspective of the same folks who ran the original study called Reagier to test rose bengal and green light against fungal keratitis and parasitic keratitis, decided and found a philanthropic donor who will fund a study that is fusarium fungal keratitis, multiple cycles of rose bengal, PDT, PDAT, and so for us, they're running the same study that we had planned to do, and of course, they are, we think, to give them the benefit of the doubt, are listen to our advice and are doing exactly what we would do as well, because we know the molecule, but we are not experts in a multitude of disease areas, and so that's Verapure and the open science approach that Ed mentioned. The goal is to collaborate, bringing our expertise plus all of the data that we see in half a dozen research program areas to a existing or a new disease area and have them get the benefit of all of that experience. You all know or may know that Provectus has a third clinical stage asset, topical PH10 for dermatology. Company has treated prior psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, actinic keratosis, but we needed to do, and we started this in 2017 and expanded it in 2022 to do further, and then continued it in 2025, where we moved from Petri dish to a large animal model, a pig study, where the folks at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, who were studying wound healing with PV10, were really kind enough to give real estate on their large pig to the Rockefeller University to gather some tissue samples of treated and untreated skin with PV10 in order to understand what was going on. The lead researcher at Rockefeller is not yet ready to roll out his data. He's still trying to comprehend what he's seeing. But what's interesting here, and we'll go back to Ed hammering home, that we need to understand what's going on with Rose Bengal, is if you think about the company that was the belle of the ball, and rightly so, because they've extended the life of pancreatic cancer patients in their study by more than 6 months. They're focused on one target, or perhaps variants of one target as a RAS inhibitor, and we can't honestly say that we have one target that PV10 goes after. It has the potential to be polite, more than one, but in the case of dermatology, it's several thousand. And so the whole idea is that when you blow up, so our target, if you want to know what our target is in cancer, it's the lysosome of the cancer cell. That's our target. Or if that's too hard for some of the industry folks, we just target the cancer cell. Because by effectively blowing up the cancer cell, or blowing up the cancer cell effectively, we generate presumably thousands of targets, the relevant targets, plural, for the immune system to learn from. Not just one thing. So we're not in the position yet to decide the next clinical trial for PH10 in dermatology, because we need to be very comfortable what is the next indication for that program based off of the wealth of data, where the computer is sort of breaking down because it's got a lot of data to process and it still can't. And the lead researcher, who's world-renowned, needs to just give us more guidance on what indications should we tackle in dermatology. In terms of early-stage assets, oral PV10, and for that matter, because we do have some internal company data on intravenously administered PV10. I think we said in some of our communications and documents, oral PV10 is a game changer. Game changer for cancer, and it's a game changer for every other disease where systemic administration is how you will solve the problem of the disease of that patient. And we want to be clear about how we've run the programs that we had the opportunity to participate in when Ed and I came in 2017. We ran those programs to help fill gaps in information. We ran those programs to generate data that folks wanted to get a better handle on. The lessons learned were continue to give injections or intratumoral injections of PV10. If there is something to inject, do so. If there's nothing to inject, then presumably there's no disease to inject. But I digress. So that's the program. But what we wanted to see was, well, what about survival? Because, as Ed mentioned, huge amount of skepticism by industry, and because of the failure of a lot of companies, whether their drugs were running clinical trials or their drug happened to be approved. What was the systemic immune response from a local injection? even TVEC, the skepticism of that would be the fact that, well, sure, 30 injections, that is needed, but also whether or not they were driving a true immune response. So we ran the metastatic uveal melanoma program. It wasn't about treating more patients, and it was the combination study with Keytruda in stage 3 melanoma patients. It wasn't more patients. It was the quality of the outcomes of the patients we treated, and that was the goal. And so, as we said, by giving more treatment if they needed it, and they could achieve a complete metabolic response by using PET-CT, using the tools available to clinicians that are meant to help define, is the treatment working? Complete metabolic response led to longer survival. And so we simply ran the program to see and to measure, to follow up, and to record the extra survival. But in doing so, and I know there are some questions from shareholders who say, well, you haven't started a clinical trial. Well, we are running the intratumoral programs to generate survival so that we could be able to say, yeah, if you give enough PV10, good things happen. But much like the Bascom-Palmer Eye Institute situation where physicians were looking for solutions for patients who'd run out of them, we were made aware of a situation of a physician who was providing oral Rose Bengal, reagent grade Rose Bengal, to cancer patients who had run out of options, who were told to get their affairs in order. In some cases, told, there's hospice, go. And so we were contacted to understand a lot of the research that we had. Much of it is published, but wanted to understand our insight into mechanism, into safety profiles, a very smart physician gathering information to determine, is this suitable for his patients? And so for the last couple of years, we've been observing that activity and understanding how those patients are doing. How do they tolerate oral Rose Bengal? How do they do? And so, we'll talk more in the future about that, but that has been a powerful amount of information, a powerful activity that has been extremely beneficial to Provectus as we prepare to expand our IND and to have oral PV10. And so what would be a lead indication that we would launch an oral PV10 phase 1 program? Because again, irrespective of the safety profile, we've got to knock safety and tolerability out for FDA. Could be pancreatic cancer, irrespective of whether you have a gene mutation or not. Could be glioblastoma. We want something tough because we want to get in there, solve that problem, have a great story for mechanism, and then welcome the world to waking up to what Rose Bengal sodium is capable of. We published work on bladder cancer research, intravesical, and not so much, not a great way to deliver PV10, oral PV10, unsurprising in terms of how well it turned out, including mice, whether in the single agent arm or in combination with the PD-1, no evidence of disease. That's what oral PV10 is capable of. And then, of course, with the rare pediatric cancer, what's really critical for us is it's obviously a rare form of cancer, maybe 100 new cases a year. But imagine if we come in and have the opportunity to treat them in a refractory setting, because we will have to start at one of the lower rungs and work our way up. But we're good because if we can St. Jude's has cracked the door open. And if we can continue to then march forward, where if the data, which Dr. Narendran has already done by demonstrating in the same indication that PV10 activates STING, so if the St. Jude's researcher is happy with the results, our hope is that he walks down the hall to his clinical colleagues and says, hey, this is a candidate that we should consider, you might want to consider for a clinical trial. So again, a lot of work to do, but that's the promise, where we want to demonstrate something where others fear to tread with something that is safe. Because again, we know A child has cancer these days, and for many of them, there are treatments that will get them into a good place. But then the challenge is as they grow up, because of the chemo and the radiation and other treatments they get, and we want to basically try to erase those by not having them deal with the side effects from other agents that they have in the first place. But again, to get into St. Jude's, to be tested by them, we'll see how it goes, but we're really, really excited. Wound healing, you saw, we hope, the paper that was published by the University of Texas Medical Branch folks in terms of the opportunity for wound healing, particularly the immune response after 120 days that was generated. There again, the model system needed to have daily application of Rose Bengal. We just started the relationship where it was day 1, I think day 7, maybe day 20. They have a model system where, again, they can easily and very comfortably for the animal apply it daily. So there's more work to do, but we're pretty happy with the results of that. As we talked about, we did do some in silico or computer modeling as the first step of drug development for ALS. We are looking at related diseases, and we're very excited by the opportunity, again, because of oral or systemically administered PV10 to enter the neurodegenerative space. But again, focus on what we can do with the programs we've described. We need more resources to go after that, but in the background, in a very cost-effective, resource-mindful way to generate data that can explain. And by the way, we are taking the data, preclinical or clinical, in each of these different areas, stuffing it into AI in order to be able to have AI take a nice step back and see what's going on across the board. And as much as in the cancer publication work, are there any inconsistencies across those 500 papers? We're asking the same question. Are there any inconsistencies in how the research that we're generating, clinical and preclinical, can you scope out a sequence that works in cancer for mechanism that is consistent with derm or neurology or whatever, and still haven't found that. So again, that's what we're testing. And then there are some proprietary projects underway as well that once we have a better feel for how the data look, how the researchers are working on, and then we'll be very happy to reveal those too. A lot of balls that we try to juggle, including, well, you are running clinical trials, you're doing research, but what about manufacturing, which is a key step in all of this, because companies have been slapped with complete response letters because of issues with respect to manufacturing their API or their drug itself. And so we manufactured a new batch of PV10. We manufactured a batch of PV305 in ophthalmology. So very happy with, again, the consistency with how that work is being done. In terms of corporate development, just talk through a few steps. In terms of planned new offices, this has been an incredible place that we hope soon will be Provectus' new headquarters. In terms of potential future activities, look, fundraising is a really critical role. It allows us to move farther, faster, and broader. And again, management led by Ed in particular will continue to invest in the company as and when he can, and or down the road may begin buying common stock. And so we hope you pay attention to those activities. As Ed said, look, the internet doesn't forget. And we believed it would have been a complete waste of resource to change the name of the company right as we rolled in. In fact, as Ed was interviewing CEO candidates, that was the playbook of one of the more prominent former CEOs who said, yeah, change the name, do a reverse split, and raise money. Okay, great. What about PV10 and rose bengal sodium? And we really didn't hear much about that. But it is coming close to the time where the company simply just needs to shed that aspect of it. You can still look it up on the internet, but again, it makes sense now. It didn't make sense those years ago. Our goal, aspiration, and hope is to do a NASDAQ uplisting at the right time when we qualify, and also because that's where the industry looks for good biotech companies to be there. So that will be our goal. And then finally, I know we do ask every year for the permission to consider a reverse split from shareholders. We're grateful for it, but in all transparency, we do it every year because we want to be transparent about it. We've explained in our Substacks companies that will do multiple reverse splits to stay on the NASDAQ. Not a great look. We will use the reverse split in a tactical situation. It is very strategic, but there's a time and a place to do it. In terms of the Open Science program, our goal in the next few weeks is to press release that we are now making vials of PV10 for research use, a high-quality pharmaceutical grade rose Bengal available to qualified researchers anywhere in the world to do research with no strings attached, no hooks, no guidance on where their research goes, no constraints on publication. The goal is we're not afraid of other folks learning more about our molecule. In a few more weeks, we'll talk about an already published paper that was representative of the program of sharing PV10. And what was great about it was that they discovered that PV10 caused the immune system to do opposing things. There was actually more than one target. It did more than one thing. It chewed gum, walked, juggled, ran at the same time. And that's something that, again, is the first kind of research to show that and is representative of what we believe PV10 is. And so we'll, as we grow that program, we'll add more features to it, a website, an MTA, a material transfer agreement for people to do that. But we expect, again, the NIH program, St. Jude's, just examples of us giving PV10 to qualified and, frankly, passionate researchers at great institutions that want to use our drug. We'll continue to follow the appropriate approach for shareholder and investor communications. We know that more communication is better, but you also need more of a balance sheet so that we can follow through. And so, but we are hopefully plan to do more of that communication, rolling out more of this information and being able to communicate just how special rose Bengal sodium is in an objective, scientifically driven, reproducible, and repeatable way. We always go through in our slide presentation and our discussion the patents, publications, presentations, and other achievements and notable activity that the company has done over the last 2 weeks. You'll see here there are 6 or 7 different categories that we're working in: solid tumor cancers, injectable, systemic, pediatric, vaccines, blood cancers. The example of just things that we continue to work on with the resources we had. We received a notification, we'll press release it over the next few weeks, of another patent application, a patent award we received, in this case essentially the equivalent of topical eye drops. Not the ophthalmology Bascom Palmer route where you are applying eye drops with green light. It is just straight up eye drops because, again, we don't necessarily think in certain indications that you need the green light, that no light or ambient light is sufficient for the molecule to behave. And now I'll turn it over to Ed for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Dominic. This is the part where we open it up, questions from the audience. How we will do that, I will recognize those in the room. But we'll also rotate. Webster Bailey will be monitoring questions posted for those participating remotely, and we'll swing back and forth and attempt to answer everyone's questions. And so the first hand I recognize, beat everyone else here, you've got a quick gun draw.
No, they didn't find a donor to run our trial, and it wasn't Bascom Palmer. The people who ran the phase 3 REAGER trial were other key opinion leaders, other notable ophthalmologists in the space. They found a donor to run the equivalent of our study We would have loved them to help pay for our study, but the point being is that they are convinced of the utility of the treatment for eye infection, and so they're continuing to push because funding is not available from NIH under the current administration because they don't want to fund necessarily studies done in other countries. And so they just needed other sources of income in order to fund that because candidly, the incidences of the eye infection in places like India and Brazil are more, and there are more of them, allowing that trial to enroll. We'll have a couple of sites in the U.S. Part of the questions of going back to FDA as part of the pre-IND package would be to take FDA's temperature about what do they think about patients enrolled outside the U.S. and what balance is necessary for FDA so that we don't want to presuppose what FDA's views are on the demographic representation of a study.
I want to use that as an example to expand on the importance and begin to raise funds. We haven't paid for any of that clinical work, any of that clinical trial work. But the great frustration is, have we been able to contribute towards that, or in future circumstances we want to, so we can have input on the trial design. Now, I'll give you one. If we were involved in the trial design, we would have given the physician, ophthalmologist, discretion to do multiple dosings of rose-bengal sodium. And just give you one example, the initial trial, the large trial, all patients, whether it's viral, bacterial, fungal, only received one dose. Basically, PB10 failed in fungal infections. And my reaction when we found it the day we got those results was, there's nothing that kills a fungal infection in one dose. Maybe hydrochloric acid, but then your eye's gone. And so a smaller clinic ran a trial of just 14 fungal infection patients and went 12 for 14. The only difference was they offered 2 doses. Our immediate question when we saw that, why didn't somebody say, well, if we went 12 for 14 on 2, how about we go 3 doses for the other 2 patients and knock those out as well? So you cannot imagine some of the frustrating experiences we encounter in this whole research world.
Ed, real quick. Yeah. Could I correct you? It was parasitic.
Parasitic, you're right. Excuse me. That's right. I said fungal.
Well, and the challenge with
which is every bit or even more challenging than fungal.
Because the parasite is burrowing into the cornea as opposed to fungal, which is kind of hanging around on the surface. And so that was a positive and perhaps surprising outcome.
Yeah, sure.
Before we go to the next question, when the question is asked, if you would repeat it so that the listeners could hear it online.
And so the question that was asked of Ed was by our shareholder was, is our proposed phase 2b/3 study being paid for by a donor? And we wanted to just clarify that it isn't. However, they're running a study with this donor funding by someone outside of Bascom Palmer that mimics the kind of work we would do to get to develop a path to approval for that indication.
Any questions you have? Okay, all right.
You want to repeat the question, Ed?
Will you repeat that question? I'll repeat it. He asked if there be a target date for when the drug would be generally available to the public. So I'll start. Dominic, you feel free to ask. There's a 2-phase aspect of that. We are very frustrated. We know there are many people that would like to access this drug. So one of the things we're exploring, and this is something that's rarely been done, is an open-ended compassionate use program. My term for it is all comers. We welcome the challenge of trying to help patients even in end-stage disease. And so that's one approach to this. One of the things we are focused on strategically in clinical trials is pick the right trial with the right provider that accepts guidance such as multiple dosing, to where we want to win as quickly as we can, because, and keep in mind, you have to segment between intratumoral, oral, or intravenous. And so our priorities are oral and intratumoral initially, so that once it's approved, then there's one way it is available, and that is through off-label use under a physician's care. And so that's going to be the fastest way to broaden use of the drug, is get it approved in intratumoral in a disease application, and then oral. And then we're confident with the information that's out there, there'll be physicians prescribing it off-label. And also we're very mindful, what would be the next form of cancer would we tackle? Just speaking of the cancer space. We have a target date. We would like to have interim results on a trial in late 2027. That would what we would aspire to. I think it'll most likely be in 2028.
It's a process,
yeah.
And we can't really gauge some target date until we know that we have an indication and a pathway to an approval in terms of the stage of clinical trial. That then ultimately, after, if the drug has won that trial, then filing an NDA to get a date. So we can't really honestly frame a target date. As it relates to the compassionate use program, we certainly aspire to that. We want to run a well-run, well-documented, FDA-accepted compassionate use program, but for oral PV10. And we have to decide the stage of patient that is appropriate, that FDA would feel comfortable with, because we simply can't open it up to everybody, early stage, late stage. And so there are a lot of factors that come into play. But fundamentally, intratumoral, we inquired early on in our tenure at Provectus is what would it cost to run an intratumoral PV10 expanded access program, because there was demand for that. And we spoke with one of our investigators at MD Anderson, where they have a lot of experience delivering PV10, particularly to hepatic or liver tumors, where the medical oncologist, who was our lead researcher, would employ the interventional oncologist, much like the folks at NIH, to deliver the medicine in the OR. The cost for a patient for every cycle of treatment would be $20,000 to $25,000. So it's clear that intratumoral presents a real challenge from a cost perspective for the company or the patient to bear as it relates to delivery. However, the reason we call oral PV10 potentially a game changer is because it's just like any other oral drug you would take, and so it leans itself towards, it's amenable towards a bold, open, expanded access program that is carefully proposed to FDA and run. But again, that will take time.
And there's a couple of key aspects to think about that. The expense is not the drug. Clinical trials and research is what drives the profitability of these institutions. To Dominic's point, $25,000, almost all that's just related to the
nursing staff.
That's right. Yeah. And so it's extraordinarily expensive. That's one of the major roadblocks that exist in this country, the drug development. Candidly, that serves Big Pharma's interest, and it serves the medical industry's interest. And to go in the route we'd love to go, it's basically unheard of as far as an all-comers trial. But here's the important thing. Once we get interim results, if we have the kind of success we anticipate, the stock price will be driven. For those of you concerned about return on your investment, the stock price will be driven off the results of those trials long before the drug's approved. And the most recent example is one of the best examples we can cite. When Revolution Medicine published the results of their phase 3 clinical trial, pancreatic cancer, using their RAS inhibitor drug, their market cap went from about $4 billion to as high as $35 billion in a matter of just a couple of weeks. and settled right around 30 to 32 billion, which is that's an insane valuation. If you break down the possible uses of that drug, know its limitations and so forth, it's a very limited population it's going to serve. Plus, it only extended life 6 months. Well, 6.5, from 6.7 to 13.2 months. And then when the cancer adapts to that drug, when it mutates, it comes back with, it is there with a vengeance. And if you follow the former Senator Sass and what he's going through, and you see some of the side effects of that in the later stages, we'd love to take on that challenge, but that's just one of the frustrating parts of navigating this industry.
And I feel like thank you, Lawrence. I think I have to play our general counsel Nathan here out to channel him by saying to Ed, yeah, well, Revolution Medicines, wonderful pedigree, VC funded by blue blood biotech venture capital investors based in, I don't know, I don't pay attention, Boston or the Bay Area, and they're not us. They had a great valuation upon which to raise venture capital rounds, IPO funding, or secondaries in the market. But we would take our drug every day of the week and multiple times on Sunday because of what we're seeing. And in particular, again, the lead indication for oral PV10, there needs to be further internal discussion about that. But we are chomping at the bit. If the lead indication is pancreatic cancer, well, part of the anecdotal clinical data that we discussed earlier gives us strong confidence that is a indication area that we would relish the opportunity and be honored to treat those kinds of patients.
If I go just a little bit deeper down this rabbit hole, it's a great example. We could be here tomorrow still talking about it. The application of that drug in pancreatic cancer, just over 90% to 95% of pancreatic cancers present with that mutation, with the RAS mutation. There's 3 different forms of it. And that's what it's effective at targeting. But it's effective only for a limited period of time. They have no other drug approvals. They failed at other efforts. And it goes to a $30+ billion valuation. That RAS mutation is estimated only be present in maybe as much as 20% of other forms of cancer. That's what we say about we believe PV10 is agnostic to cancer type.
And we'll go into that, and let me push the rabbit hole further. So the valuation that Revolution Medicines is getting is wonderful, great for them. I'm really happy for everybody that works there. The issue for them is going to be, how does Wall Street look at however they roll out whatever the pricing is? And so their NDA presumably should be filed before the end of the year. They'll come out with what their pricing is. And it would seem that valuation, essentially in a discounted cash flow NPV calculation, is assuming that the total addressable market is greater than just pancreatic cancer patients with the RAS mutation or variants thereof. So they're sort of saying, hey, so either they charge a really high price based off of the pancreatic cancer addressable market, or sort of a high price times all potential solid tumors. And again, we've been very frank about our goal of what are we trying to build in a drug development company. How are we trying to build PV10 is we hope it's a safe, effective treatment that changes the disease trajectory of a patient. We are very mindful of quality of life during and after treatment, and we want to make the drug affordable and accessible. So that's our full approach to solving the problem of cancer. And over the next many months, we hope to highlight what as we've talked about, what we feel comfortable saying about the true, fulsome mechanism of action of Rose Bengal, where the RAS inhibitor is oncogene theory, where there's one particular thing inside the cancer cell that the drug is trying to go after, otherwise known as a targeted therapy. Great for them, wonderful scientists who have worked very hard on that theory and promote those drugs. There's another class of drugs that unfortunately Provectus kind of ran into as it was running its melanoma study called immunotherapies. You may have heard of them, where their whole premise is that if there are a few T cells running around a tumor, then releasing the brakes off of the immune system. We're not entirely sure you want to drive a car by releasing the brakes, but nevertheless, that focuses in on them. But what happens when the tumor is so-called cold? Does it work for those tumors? Clinical data has shown that it doesn't. We ascribe to a different theory that is soundly based in science, soundly based in data, and we look forward to using that as part of our communications programs, our shareholders, and to the market at large, so that folks can see what we're proposing and what we stand behind as we launch these clinical trials.
Other questions? Yes.
Be sure to repeat the question, please.
Sure. Thank you, Esther. So the question is, if we advance the NIH work from its current stage into a phase 2 clinical trial, is it reasonable to believe that they would pay for that? I think there would be some cost sharing, and we don't know yet. And we're being polite. We've already talked with them about a phase 2 clinical study. The question, and the beauty of working with NIH is that we get to ask their clinicians, how do you see this PV10 fitting into the treatment ladder for HCC? What's the type of patient population? Should we combine with the standard of care? So we sort of have everything in an entire basket by working with them, from the researcher through to the clinician who can lead a clinical trial. And so we don't know how much. Presumably we will have to contribute some portion, a large portion of the clinical trial, as we would running any other clinical trial that's sponsored by Provectus. But the fact that we can get there, we can stand shoulder to shoulder with the folks at NIH, is a great validation, and not sure, it's hard to put a price on that aspect of the relationship as it progresses to that hope-for stage.
In other words, it'll be easier to raise money if we're doing a clinical trial at NIH than anywhere else. The second aspect of that, on the very first call, we didn't know how much they had studied the molecule. We've been blown away, because every time we have a conversation, we realize they've studied it more and more. And they actually voiced their interest in exploring other cancers if we're successful in this HCC, and we're confident we'll be. And
let me build on what Ed is saying. Not only were they interested in potentially exploring other cancers, but introducing us to other departments within NIH that can further explore, poke at, identify, characterize the molecule. That's great. And yeah. So
if you think about what I was commenting before, the fundamental thing we have to do is understand how this drug works. Nobody believes you can do this. Nobody.
Oh, and I want
to. So
you
merge in. We're going to have an enormous greater credibility if we bring our knowledge about the mechanism of action combined with their knowledge. I don't know how you get a better good housekeeping seal of approval than that.
And one last thing to build on what Ed said earlier, they are incredibly receptive to our feedback and our ideas and our opinions of how the molecule is. The emails are long and challenging, but they're open to our ideas without necessarily dismissing it out of hand, without following up. And so it really is a collaboration. It's a wonderful relationship, and we can't wait for it to move to the next stage.
We've got a very passionate online group here. There's still 71 participants, just for those who are counting. A couple questions. I'm going to kind of lump some together because they're pretty similar. A couple of questions are surrounding our current cash position. How much cash does Provectus have available today? What is our monthly burn rate? How many months do we have left? And where will the next $5 to $10 million come from? So.
You'll take that one. I'm hoping you got somebody.
Yeah.
No. Sure. Well, jump in or
let me start with we're still here today. And if you ask the question in that framework, we're not on the NASDAQ. Our goal is to be around. We're moving as fast as we can. Things are driven by fundraising, but we're here today.
Yeah. I'll jump in. I won't hang you out.
Thank you.
I'll be very specific. Our cash is always tight. Our burn rate's about $250,000 a month in a range from $225 to $275, which is petty cash compared to drug development companies. An update on fundraising. I've got a verbal commitment from an individual. Donna got it to focus with that individual as recently yesterday afternoon of a commitment of $1 million. I've been in discussions with a wealthy individual who has voiced interest in investing as much as $5 million. Spoken with an institution that is initially, they're evaluating the due diligence right now in the range they talked $2 to $3 million. None of those are promised. I'm getting ready to do more trips to the west part of the country, and there's some very promising leads there. I've been working on strategy for raising capital that dates back 5 years. And if that materializes, that will free up a significant amount of capital, including for myself. Technology identified. I was fortunate to be called about approximately 5 years ago, and just to be open about it, it's scheduled to go public as an IPO sometime in the next few months, and that'll free up funding, as well as some other individuals who believe in this drug that I got into it as well. And so the goal is to raise $20 to $25 million in the coming months or 12 months. Hopefully it'll be in the next 6. And there's interest in more sophisticated investors. A lot of them are passionate about hearing it. They're very interested in helping to find a medicine such as this. And one of the biggest obstacles, though, is when they go and talk to their investment advisors. The investment advisors poo-poo it because we're not on the NASDAQ. It sounds too good to be true. It sounds like a snake oil, and they won't take the dang time to get an education. And my attitude is bring anybody to the table you want to bring. MD, PhD, any others will go through it. But that's a fundamental reason why I'm so passionate about mechanism of action. Because it's what we're doing. It's great about a matter that I'm not an MD or PhD. Go toe-to-toe with anybody they bring into the room and back it up with what we've done.
And
I'll just be blunt. That's why and with this mechanism of action, I don't think in the early years it would have mattered what credentials we brought to the table. Nobody believed it. The only people that believed it were the ones that's more of an investment in trusting the people involved than it is in the trusting the science. And I think that will change now as people start to realize we're not crazy. The mechanism of this drug, the science behind it is very, very real. And I have a phrase that everyone's tired of hearing. They'll be studying this molecule long after I leave this earth. That's how capable it is and how unique it is.
And then I'd just build on what Ed said in terms of answering that question, Webster, to say we're trying to raise money and manage the cap table of the company, and raise money in a respectful way to the common shareholders, and it's a question of managing dilution. We are approached daily with opportunities to invest. We have been around the block enough to understand the potential terms of those things, and it's a quick delete on the email or delete on the voicemail. So we're trying to manage the capitalization of the company as we raise the money. And again, just speaking to classmates, we don't have $500 million in the balance sheet because it looks good. And if you want a company like that, please buy those shares. We know exactly what we have. We have a team that has made sacrifices, is incredibly passionate about what we're trying to do, who we're trying to serve, and we feel comfortable that, will be around. We think we'll be around, and we're going to work to be around.
I'll close with this. For me, this journey started, I first learned about the molecule in the fall of 2005, and I remember turning to Doug Joker and one of our other colleagues when we left the building. And my first reaction was, if this drug will do the thing it does, it's the perfect agent for tackling breast cancer. That was my first assessment, with a whole lot of qualifiers, if it'll do what they claim it'll do. If you look at what the potential, I still believe, I'm more confident than ever, this drug will transform medicine. It will transform cancer care. I'm betting it. I'm betting any cash I can come up with, and I'll continue to place that bet every day. And so, its mechanism, like I say, as much as we know, I feel like we're 95+% understanding it, but I bet there'll be things revealed years from now that we don't recognize. The complexity of what it does upon that lysosomal structure. I told Don when we got the third generation of what we were working on with AI, I reread again, and I'm like, you can fit 30 of the best physicians in a room, and they've never made all these connections. Ain't no way.
And that's cancer. And we have clinical programs in 2 other areas, and preclinical programs where we're trying to see if the mechanism of action for those disease programs matches and is consistent with the thoroughness that we've been able to suss out for cancer. And so there's a lot more work to be done beyond cancer, but of course we've got to focus and do what we need to do.
And one more point I'll make, the journey officially started in getting control of the board in April of 2017, actually it started for me personally, officially on the morning of July the 14th, 2016. So I'm coming up on the 10th anniversary. If you had told me then we'd still be here today, as tough as this has been, I'd say, hey, no way. But I also would say, we've been able to raise the money we have. And this isn't trying to sugarcoat anything. I can say flat out, I'll say the good Lord has a plan for this drug. That's my belief. And having to go slow and having limited dollars and having to be great stewards of every dollar, we've learned so much that would have never been discovered had we had a pile of money. Because the typical research work that's being done would have taken us down rabbit holes, and a lot of stuff would never been discovered. And we'd have made some real mistakes too. And if you have any doubts about even the most elite research centers making fundamental errors, I'll take many trials run with one dose of it as it comes. I've worked this for my life. Literally, a defining moment occurred the first International Cancer Conference I attended in New York. I'm sitting on the 3rd row from the back in this huge auditorium. I know the guy that happens to be sitting on my left, so I spotted him, so I sit beside him. I have no idea the guy on my right. We just said hello. The 3rd presenter at the renowned cancer conference is sitting up presenting about his research. I'm sitting here just like this, and I'm looking at his about 4th or 5th slide, and I say, speaking to the guy on my left without turning to him, said, I don't have to have a PhD in statistics to know that drug's going anywhere. It should have been shut down yesterday. Literally, that's almost an exact quote. The guy on my right, without looking at me, just said, he works to keep things shut out, to keep resources tied up, because as long as you're tying up those resources, that means at their prices that they pay, that means a company like this can't get in affordably. And that's how this game is played. So I'm a little passionate about it, as you can tell, so I'll shut up.
I don't know when to interject. Again, several questions. I'll try to make our way through them as best we can. Quickly, is there an update on the penile squamous cell trial?
We are hoping to receive FDA clearance of the program in the third quarter. If and when we do, we will let shareholders know.
Thank you. Another quick question for Bascom Palmer. Do you know how many patients have been used in their Rosenthal work?
So they have treated probably about 140 at Bascom Palmer, but of course, Bascom Palmer physicians have become alumni at other locations, other universities, and other folks around the world in India, Brazil, Mexico are using the approach, and so it's hard to pin down that number, but we've heard up to about 500, but we have not been able to confirm that.
Thank you. Could you please expand a little bit more on the Rockefeller Foundation research?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we could spend a long time talking to you about the Rockefeller University work. It is been repeated from when he started looking at keratinocytes in a monolayer in a petri dish. So one of the core elements of our skin is keratinocyte, so that's an artificial setting. He then, there was great collaboration with the folks in Texas. He couldn't run a large pig study in New York. Health folks there would have shut him down. And so it was wonderful that the folks in Texas enabled that work. And so that was much more representative, pig skin being a great proxy for human skin when you're looking at dermatological testing. And so all we'll say right now is that essentially the computer broke down because of the amount of data in terms of not the gigabytes of data. There were that, but it was the complexity and the multiplicity of what he was seeing in terms of what was going up, what was going down, how many were going up, how many were going down. And I think we want to be respectfully opaque about this because it's important for the investigator to wrap his head around what the data say. And when then we are able to then ask, so great, and what is the indication you think this data initially support? So I think that's sort of going to be how I limit my comments until we have something more formally that we can share with shareholders in the market.
Thank you. Have there been any distinct negative outcomes that we've run across so far, and is there a negative component that we are keeping in mind as we move forward in developing dosage forms?
Sure. I mean, there's two ways to answer that question. In terms of negatives, well, we disclosed to FDA, filed all of our paperwork, but we had a serious adverse effect in a patient in the uveal melanoma program because unbeknownst to the physician, they had had a prior kidney surgery that limited the ability for the kidney for that amount of, because there was some extravasation, rose bengal or PB10 injected in the tumor got pushed back out and circulated through the system, and their kidney could not excrete that amount of the drug that goes through the kidney for excretion. Rose bengal leaves the body pretty quickly relative to other drugs. You've heard half an hour half-life within the day. Generally speaking, much of it's gone. Most of it, the vast majority of it, is excreted via the liver through the bile. But a small amount has been documented to exit the kidney, and this patient did not have the ability to excrete it in an efficient manner. And so there was some transient photosensitivity, and they had to be hospitalized from what is normally an outpatient setting procedure to inject PB10 into a hepatic tumor and then come back in 4 weeks for the next cycle of treatment if you need it. So that would be a negative. There was an early SAE as it relates to vasculature that was wrapped up in the tumor. And so the injection of the tumor, breaking it down, starts to then unlock or open those vasculatures, and there's bleeding that the physicians were unprepared for, but that can be staunched knowing those. So there are aspects of that. Dosing is always a great question, and for us, and it may sound cute, we kind of, in an oral PB10 study, we are going to need to understand what is the so-called maximum tolerable dose. That's kind of how you run these early-stage clinical trials, sort of give an amount to the patient to see when do they get sick. And what was interesting about the anecdotal clinical data that we referenced before is it's teaching us, preparing us for when we design that first oral PB10 study for cancer and then later for other diseases, how dosing those. In terms of negatives, Ed is famous for saying, well, the molecule hasn't disappointed us yet when we venture into new disease areas, and that remains a common thread in the work clinically and preclinically that we've done across probably a dozen disease areas.
If I could add just two additional comments. Dominic knows so much, he's way up here, so I always try to bring it down to here for people. And that patient is MD Anderson. It's a tremendous explanation, Dominic. Let me sum it up for you. She accumulated iodine and became toxic, and they treated her, cleared the iodine accumulation, and she was fine. So really just something that was totally unexpected. It was an undisclosed pre-existing medical condition from a prior surgery.
Very low percentage of people that have some sensitivity, usually minimal reaction. It is possible for some reaction.
And one more piece of information about a second example. That patient was among the first 5 patients treated in San Diego by Dr. Paul Goldfarb. What, Dominic, 15 years ago now? 14 years ago?
Yeah.
And he never expected to see the drug kill the tumor so rapidly. And so they weren't prepared for internal bleeding. And basically what it was because the tumor was dying so fast, people don't realize cancer cells can basically replace healthy cells in a blood vessel. So as you kill that cancer cell, suddenly the blood vessel erupts. He had internal bleeding and they couldn't save him. An elderly male patient. And we've thought a lot about that patient because I think it had an adverse impact on a lot of the decisions the company made years ago. I've always believed they should have pursued liver. They just basically didn't pursue it. They should have. Anyway. But so there's been no reason other than the patient he mentioned, MD Anderson, even approaching us here as adverse event.
Ed, we're reaching close to 6 o'clock. So.
Yeah.
I'll make this quick. Also, several of these questions that I'm not going to read have been answered previously during the presentation. So for those of you online who don't get to your questions, probably because we already covered that previously. Are there any future ideas or combinations with other anti-cancer agents on the horizon?
Well, the company has done a lot of combinations with, let's just stick to cancer, radiotherapy, checkpoints, 1 checkpoint, 2 checkpoints, combination with chemo. So it plays well with other drugs. I think the answer to your question is a function of what disease indication we choose and what's the standard of care. If we're forced to combine with a drug because it's standard of care, because that's how most studies are done with a new agent entering that arena, then so be it. But our goal is obviously to the cure for cancer is going to, or the recipe for the cure for cancer is going to have a number of ingredients. We think PB10 is going to be a major one, but it may necessitate that we combine with an agent to run a clinical trial in a particular cancer setting and stage of treatment.
And I would just add to close on that, I can think of 2 specific things we discussed strategically to expand the capabilities to Dominic's point about a recipe for cure. No single agent is going to cure everybody. So there's different things we discuss, and I immediately think of a very unique potential use of a low-cost material that we might find effective at some future date when we have the resources to explore it further.
Ed, do you want to do closing remarks?
Yeah. With that, well, one more. I can't ignore my longtime partner, Doug Yoakley. So this is the last question. We've taken a lot off there. Let me answer this way. Okay, well, he was asking, Doug Yoakley was asking, do we foresee a possible event that may be unforeseen right now, but it could trigger a recognition of this drug and clamoring for it? As an example, it may be a recognition that the country would be clamoring for it. And so, one of the legal counsel said earlier, you will find out if I go too deep into this. Personal opinion, I'm not going to speak the time frame, but I think it could be highly likely that would happen. It may be a relatively early report on clinical trials. I know we spend a lot of time strategizing about how to create that event. I hope we create it. I got the question just earlier today. I've gotten it as recently as Wednesday. I get almost every week from someone. Have you talked to Robert Kennedy yet? Have you talked to this person yet? Have you talked to that person? Have you gone? And so that could be the type of event. Answer, have I talked to Robert Kennedy yet? No. I was approached, contacted, 3 months ago, by a potential investor who's very interested in what we're doing, and he had an avenue for me. He was confident he could give me introduced to Robert Kennedy. And he was very disappointed when I tried to explain to him, yes, and believe me, we've worked on several avenues to go to the right people. And the most common one right now people identify as Robert Kennedy. I would say there's at least 2 others. But the timing's got to be right. And I'll give you a simple example I think everybody here can identify with. The last thing I want to do is create a huge reaction of interest in this drug if we're sitting here with almost no cash. So if you can encourage people to invest, encourage them. Because I promise you, I have no interest in creating a firestorm about this drug when we're sitting here with less than $500,000 in cash. I mean, we're below that. We're sitting with less than $100,000 today. And so that's one of the reasons for this rolling raise. Very focused on trying to raise that range of money. Because when it happens, we're in a whole nother league about what we have to manage. I'm telling you, we plan communication strategies, defense strategies. I'm not even going to go down some of the things. I'll give you one example. I can point to something in my office right now that I've been trying to explore ways in which we can outreach the country and the world if we have to in communications rapidly. If we end up in a battle against Big Pharma, somehow trying to force this into a sellout or trying to disparage what we're doing. Because I promise you, you have no idea how brutal it can be. And you have no idea. I mean, it is. I've gotten phone calls you can't imagine of people warning me. And people I've never even met saying, you all realize what you're up against. And so, Doug, I believe that will eventually happen. And let me give you an example, and I'll shut up after this. Here's the prime example. I had a pathway right in to choose the office. I've said this before, to meet with President Trump on COVID. And what did I say? I knew we had to be bulletproof. Because I already knew the stakes that were going on over vaccines. And you go back to the history of vaccines and the money farmers made and so forth, and watching it transform from what it was when I was a kid, when I first got into healthcare consulting, to what it is today, it is a money printing machine beyond anything you can imagine. It's compromised doctors like you cannot imagine. And so, it had to be bulletproof. And this is a political statement, it's just reality. When Trump lost the election, and I heard he's being appointed in certain key positions at FDA, my comment to Dominic Rodriguez is, we wouldn't make it back to Knoxville, Tennessee, if we went in there and showed what we had. Just think about it. The media, don't forget the media, the top dogs of three of the biggest investment firms in the world. Try BlackRock, try Vanguard. Look at their ties to media. Look at their ties to news. Look at what they did to ivermectin, a drug I remember reading about when a book came out in 1992, the history of it, what it meant to the world, and they destroyed ivermectin. I phrased it, if they do the ivermectin, what are they going to do to a bunch of us with no credentials? And so, and now to find in May of last year, researchers in Italy using a supercomputer, because Europe's been devastated by post-COVID situation. Their health systems are just in one sense, in tatters in a lot of ways. And so, if you look at what transpired, and for them to study over 250,000 different agents for effectiveness against COVID and COVID mutations, and what did they do? They found 4. But the bottom 2 were not effective against mutations. The top 2, and the number 2 was not, number 1 was Rosenthal sodium. It was our work. Number 1. And yet we would have been destroyed had we taken on delivering a therapeutic, because we would have been standing in the way of these major pharma companies and the media and everyone else literally making hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. So, but I believe that will be, I think it's highly possible that could be what really lifts up the stock. And then empowers us to raise even more money for better defenses. I think that's my closing remark. Yes, sir. Oh, yes. Thank you, John. That's right. If I said anything that implies certainty, I misspoke. Because this is about as unpredictable and as high risk as you can get. So, thank you, Nathan.
So I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank everyone online. Susan, if you want to just wrap things up, we appreciate your help in guiding us through this call. And we'll look forward to meeting you next year at the annual meeting, but look forward to all of the intervening work that we do and sharing that with you. Thank you, everybody, again.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you. We appreciate the continued interest in Provectus, and thank you to Ed, Dominic, and the rest of the Provectus team and shareholders for your time today. If you have any follow-up questions that weren't addressed today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at investorrelations@pvct.com. This concludes today's meeting. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.